Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick. Welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on the planet Earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. Listen to their stories, hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest on this week's episode is Acharya Shunya. She's a teacher, author and speaker, a scholar of nondual wisdom, Advaita, and master of yoga and Ayurveda. During our conversation, we talk about her forthcoming book, Sovereign Self, her thoughts on what being in personal sovereignty will and can create for humanity if we align with our personal and collective sovereignty. Shunya also shares her knowledge about health, which is so important during a time when so few people have knowledge of what this really is. So, as always, I begin by asking my guests. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel you're most her?
When I go inside myself, Carol, I spend a lot of time engaged in the world as a spiritual teacher, author, healer, mom, partner to my husband, daughter to my father. But then there are times when I just take a step back, and I don't necessarily have to close my eyes. But when I go in and I know I'm going in to meet myself with a capital S, I feel the resonance go up. Everything seems to fade away, and something quite high vibration starts welcoming me. I feel good there.
That's a beautiful response. Thank you. And can you just tell us a little bit more about your journey into being the woman and the teacher that you are today? What brought you to this space, or is it something that has always been a knowing that you've just encompassed from the beginning?
You know, now, Carol, it feels like my soul has been working with the yogic knowledge called the Vedas, the oldest system of knowledge from India, sacred wisdom, probably for a couple of lifetimes, because what emerges forth from me and how spontaneously everything emerges, it really feels like I might have mastered this stuff in another lifetime. Mm-hmm. But definitely karma saw to it, things outside my control, a greater destiny, a greater force, saw to it that I was born in a Vedic lineage, a 2,000-year-old lineage. And when I was growing up, it felt like just any other family. And I thought, it's normal to have your grandfather be visited by thousands of people, or your great-grandfather to be renowned in your city as a saint. I thought that's cool. And I'd climb trees and I'd, go to a regular school. But then when I turned 9, I started drifting towards my grandfather. He was a teacher, and he would always be surrounded by seekers, not just Indians, but interestingly, in the late 1960s, early 1970s, people from England, Australia, America were coming to our small, tiny pilgrimage town, Ayodhya, and they would sit in the back end and listen to his satsang, or spiritual discourse. And then he took a fancy to me, my grandfather, and kept grooming me. Mm-hmm. And, despite India being a somewhat of a patriarchal society, and the whole world is still patriarchal, Carol, you'll agree.
Yes.
So it's not like we're done. But he chose me, and I became the first feminine leader for my ancient lineage in the 21st century. And it's been a very comfortable space for me to occupy, because I somehow kept feeling like this is what I have to do. And now it's not like there's a space between what I do, as in teach and write, and who I am. It feels like an extension of my being. such a relief to do what I do. You know, that place where your work is your dharma, and you don't have to carry it with stress, it just carries you. That's where I am, Carol.
That's great. Thank you. And one of the things that I wanted to find from you, do you work is it that you station yourself mainly in India, or do you tend to travel to the West? Where is it that you are based and do most of your work from?
I am based in Bay Area, California, Northern California. That's where I live with my partner, my son, my dogs, and that's the international headquarters of my work now. But my dad is still, you know, he's a grand old man now, and I visit India and I go back to my ancestral home where my uncle is still a spiritual teacher, and the work is going on in both countries. So try to go back once or twice a year.
And something else that I wanted to ask you as well, in terms of being, you know, this is your cultural background, this is your cultural roots, and then especially this is the reason I just wanted to work out where you were based, is in particular being based in the West. How more or less receptive do you feel that Western culture is to you, because it's coming directly from you? If you, like you say, you have the true lineage, as it's like your blood lineage, as opposed to when things get adopted by teachers in the West and then become different versions of what may or may not be the purity of the teachings or the lineage. How have you been received? What have you noticed? What are your thoughts on that?
How fascinating that you would ask me that, especially at a time when we are looking at, you know, people of color and the integration, cultural integration. And even in the field of spirituality, I feel that some of the knowledge got lifted from the Indian subcontinent and became whatever people wanted it to become. And so then when a teacher like me comes along, who's teaching from the scriptures and is equally comfortable being its ambassador, it's a bit intimidating for the teachers who have adopted it at a more, you know, Western sensibility.
Yeah.
But then once again, every part of the world, and whatever color be our skin and whatever be our cultural roots, there are always the people who are fair-minded, open, expansive, right? And then there are the closed people, and they live in India too. So I get welcomed and embraced and hugged and thanked by the expansive people of the West.
Right.
And it's been a beautiful journey. I mean, more than 90% of my students are from outside India, in different parts of the world. Every day I learn about a new country from which I have a student. And it's been fun, you know, from Saudi Arabia to Tanzania to Australia, New Zealand, of course, and England, and, you know, just everywhere. And it's amazing. And, you know, if you ask me, Carol, I would say the Western culture, not everybody, but more and more, there's a priming and a thirst for and a yearning for the deep spiritual journey. Whereas when I look at my own culture in India, or the culture that belongs to my body, I see more consumerism and more materialism. So it feels like the West and the East are on different trajectories. And once the East was the holder of all wisdom, but now it's going through a cycle of wanting to be more of a materialistically balanced. I think the world is going through its own seesaw.
Yeah.
And I'm at an interesting place at an interesting time. And it's fascinating. I have to commend that I found some of the deepest seekers in different parts of the world. Because the knowledge I teach, Ayurveda for body, yoga for mind, and Advaita or non-duality from the Vedas, the Indian scriptures, is universal. It was never meant for one kind of people who ate a certain way or prayed a certain way or mated a certain way. It was for all beings, period. And it's very well received. And it's not dogma. It's about the consciousness. And who can claim that consciousness is theirs and not another's? It's a universal fact.
And I really like the title of your book, Sovereign Self, because I think, the way that I have viewed this year in particular, 2020, and it's been a year of so much. It's been 20 years in 1 year, maybe, for all the things that have happened, but all of the opportunity, I believe, for us to really find a connection and really delve into that inquiry and that discovery of who we are as sovereign beings. I personally did a solo podcast like a few weeks back that was about sovereignty, because I was noticing that with all of the external events that are happening, the people that are managing to ride it with some semblance of sanity and peace and love still in their hearts and also optimism for the future are the ones that have a real connection to who they are as sovereign beings. How does that relate to what's in your book and how it relates to these times? How can you elaborate on that?
I like it. I like that you brought that up and that you yourself are gravitating towards honing into that message of sovereignty as a spiritual teacher and as a leader. It's so true, Carol. And when I started my work, people have anxiety, people have relationship issues, people have existential or psychological or material suffering. And it can be superficial, it can be horizontal, depth-wise. We can look at the human being and their suffering at every level and come up with a cognitive solution, an attitude change, a belief perspective change, a mantra, a yantra, a yoga, a breath. But I kept feeling these are all Band-Aids. And I didn't want to be a Band-Aid teacher. I like deep things. That's just who I am. And I have been given really deep knowledge in a systematic way over 14 long years. And I'm not a quick fix teacher. And so when I looked deep down, it was ultimately an inability of self-governance.
Right.
And because we cannot do self-governance, we cannot restrain ourselves and our senses, we don't succeed in what we want to do, whether it's a diet or whether it's staying off of a dysfunctional, toxic relationship, because we have no self-control. And we have no self-control because we don't have a concept of self. And there is another self within us. Call it the higher self, the true self, the source, the divine self, or as I call it, the sovereign self, because its freedom is non-negotiable. It doesn't need to be saved. It's always free, and always free to write and rewrite one's destiny, change one's life, and pick oneself up from the darkest, deepest hole that our ego or mind, lamenting and screaming, would have dug itself and climbed into and hidden from the world. So I wanted to tell the world about this sovereign concept, and it becomes relevant whether it is political upheavals that we're seeing in our nation, America, whether it is a pandemic, whether it is relationship issues, or whether it's a fight with our own progressive chronic ailment. We need to connect with something that's eternally sovereign within us and exercise that sovereignty. And with that, one comes into life, one can engage in a full throttle, passionate way to win. But if we don't win, for example, we won't be dead internally. We won't feel suicidal and depressed. And if we lose things or things are taken away from us, such is the nature of life, a sovereign being can find something within themselves. So it's an empowered state. It's a state of more strategic consciousness. It's a state of greater awareness about the self. It leads to better boundary setting. It leads to more relationship hygiene. It leads to greater emotional autonomy. It leads to greater intellectual discernment and even the practice of detachment from what is no longer serving us. You might have heard of the word yoga, which means union, and we're all trying to be in union with our soulmate or with our job or our profession. But life doesn't work like that. There's another Sanskrit word which means viyoga, which means consciously choosing not to be in that darn union with whatever and separating from it. So, and the moment we separate in whatever we are fused in, screaming and shouting and grasping and being greedy and needy and pretending like we can't live without that thing or person or situation to roll out the way we want it to. And the moment we exercise yoga, it's an attitude shift. We shift back, we let go, and suddenly all our sovereign power returns to us. And this happened in my own life, Carol, where I would just get stuck, like grabbing onto my son or my partner or my sister should die because she did die on me. And it's like, wait, can I really hold on to a couple of waves in the ocean of impermanence? Can I really stop the wind from swirling around in a desert where wind is flowing? And so the whole concept of sovereignty was a very deep, deep path towards not trying to control what is outside you, but being a master of your own being and your own choices and your own responses. And it's working. I've been teaching this now. Now it's coming out in the form of a book, Sovereign Self, probably just a few days more, and it's out there. It's already available for pre-order. And it's working. I have countless people who were in toxic relationships or not living their full potential and in bondage of societal constraints, and they're walking tall now. I like it.
There's a couple of things I want to ask you, actually. The first is, it seems all of us manage to have more than one, I would say, a few toxic entanglements that we then have to get onto the other side of it. Is it purely because of the external structure and message of society that we end up in that position, or is it some karmic thing? How would you answer that?
It's a cosmic thing along with being a karmic thing. The ancient Vedas describe it like a hypnotic spell, and they call it Maya. And Maya in Sanskrit means, the ancient language of the yogis, it means that which is not. So it's like a collective illusion, because of which we look outside ourselves. We forget that the treasure of peace, security, self-love lies within us. And we start seeking outwards and we get stuck. And it takes either we will get unstuck through suffering, repeated encounters with suffering, and then we'll say, just like we get an electric shock with an open wire and we go, you know what? I'm not going to touch that open wire no more, So we learn it the negative way, the hard way. And another way to learn it is known as Jnana Yoga, or the path of knowledge, which I talk about and teach in my book, making it really simple for modern people, which says, look, there are 3 kinds of relationships: with other people, with other things. Go ahead and enjoy them, but don't forget there's a 3rd relationship with your own self. And not just the ordinary self in the mind, but a deeper self that's really stable, special, and spectacular. And you want to go looking for that. So, but until either a guru kind of person, like a true one, not the pop star kinds who kind of just, take us on a spin. The real teacher, a mentor, could be a psychologist, could be a counselor, could be a real teacher, a good book. Something makes us look inward. Who am I? And am I really so dependent, or am I an independent being? Does my power come from others approving it and validating it? Or is it my own power? Can I exercise it? Can I exercise it even to navigate my way out of the mess that I am in? It's been interesting to use it in my own life. And I didn't really write the book right after I got my title. I wrote it a good 2.5 decades later, after I worked with this knowledge and became more sovereign in my own relationships, Kara.
Great, thank you. The other point, it's not the only other point, but the next point I wanted to just discuss with you is, as we have experienced a health issue on the world plane this year, obviously the focus has very much been on health and what health is. And my personal understanding of it is, I think we, as a people, the majority of people will not necessarily really know what true health is. I mean, me personally, now I'm in my 40s, and it's a conversation that I've had with a friend before, a couple of times, actually, a couple of people, but in particular with a friend who had a similar background to me, in that when we were younger, we were, not only because we were younger, but because we were athletes, we were very much aware of a peak state of functioning as a human being. So we're very much about how our bodies can be maintained. And even years later, though we're not as fit as we used to, we are very much aware of the difference between when we're at our peak state and the state that we're functioning at now, which is actually probably much higher than the average person, because I think from what I understand, people are not necessarily understanding what pure, real health looks like and feels like. And then I think this also would come back to sovereignty. Then something external can then come and overtake all the work that you do, or all the control or the aspects of balance that you can maintain within your own body to have health and to actually have peak experience within your body. How does Ayurveda, because you use this knowledge, how can that be used to get somebody to really truly understand what it is to have the best state in your body on the planet? And how can we, as people who just learning about Ayurveda, how can we kind of start to bring those practices or that knowledge into our daily life on a basis that is, easy for us to adopt, so we're not just turning over the leaf and starting something completely new tomorrow? So what can we start to bring in on a daily basis that is doable?
I loved your connection of the peak experience with an experience of health. It's a very intuitive space that you can be in. And Ayurveda, which literally is made up of two words, Ayur and Veda, which means knowledge of life, not of knowledge of disease, but knowledge of life, wants us to live in that peak state. And that peak state may change based on the season or the aging, but that's where it gives us these adjustments, where even it has detailed recommendations on exercising, different for athlete, different for different ages, on sexuality, when to have intercourse, when to rest, what can we drink before intercourse, what can we eat after it, to maintain the stamina and the vitality and the integrity of the sperm and the egg. What should women do when they start menstruating, and every year thereafter, right until menopause? What special foods can they consume? What breath can they take? What lifestyles can they lead, so that their menstruation becomes a painless experience and not a source of misery, needing a hormonal replacement therapy or some drastic things, but part of their life, like it has always been for ancient women. Why does it have to be a big drama just for modern women? So Ayurveda brings us back to our original physiology, which has nothing to do with our air conditioners and our, artificial nutraceutical supplements. It brings us back to our original clothing in the skin. Uh, what I mean to say is, as animals, we are superior beings. We have great minds, but Ayurveda says we have great bodies too. But we have forgotten that connection with nature, which our ancestors knew. They didn't have to wear thick coats or need special sandals, and they could just operate. The human being kept evolving and kept growing and had a lot more resilience because we were in touch with nature. But because we've forgotten, Ayurveda sages say, look here, we're going to connect you back to what it means to be a real biological being on the planet, connected with the sun, moon, and wind. And that sun, moon, and wind live inside you too as energy bodies or energy systems called doshas, vata, pitta, kapha. Pitta metabolizes everything in you, it's the sun. Vata moves everything within you, it's the wind. And kapha nourishes and makes you glow, it's the moon. And if you eat this, you might be 87, but you'll be the peak of your 87th year. If you do this and don't do this, you'll have a peak moment of health. In fact, that peak moment, or that you like it is swastha. And swastha literally means established in the self, established in the spiritual self, so that we can experience a divine nature, established in a pure mind, so we can enjoy our inherent intelligence, and established in a toxic-free, healthy, happy, well-exercised, well-fed, well-rested, and well-touched and well-celebrated body, so we can enjoy our material nature of our existence. Ayurveda is very ancient, it's very poetic. I teach it. In fact, my teachings are called alchemy through Ayurveda because I feel like it creates alchemical changes to our body. It's mystical, it's magical, and yet there is a deep science. And with the pandemic going around, I always tell people that, they should make turmeric, which is a spice well known in the world now, Ayurvedic spice as their best friend, and try and swallow like a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric or a capsule first thing in the morning. I prefer the original spice, the organic spice. But if you can't, it's a little bitter, then you can just swallow a capsule first thing in the morning. And that really, it's now, turmeric is being studied. It's been known in Ayurveda for thousands of years, but now it's being studied and utilized for HIV and AIDS prevention, cancer prevention, blood disorders, and immunity enhancement. So we could just use our kitchen spice. That will help. And if they're interested, they can always look up an Ayurveda book, or, my book, Ayurveda Lifestyle Wisdom, is around and it's done well. And they could check that out too if they want.
Beautiful, thank you. And yes, isn't it interesting how it takes so long for the natural things to be allowed to seep through a little bit in the West. I mean, obviously, we know these things have always been around, and my background in my family is Caribbean, so they've always been cooking teas and herbs and everything like that for all of that. And I used to do some work a few years back for a company that had a health supplement, and it was a turmeric blend. And it was always interesting because when I had the Indian women would also come and see us charging so much for this, and they were like, it's haldi, isn't it? They call it, is it haldi?
Yes.
Yeah. The way that it was called. So they would think it was quite hilarious that we were selling such a simple thing for some money, you know. And I used to joke with her, and I would say, you know, just you make some teas for people and catch the wave, because I think because of the suppression of natural remedies and nature as a healer in itself in the West, every time somebody will suggest something as basic as a turmeric root or ginger or lemon or anything like that, it seems people can't get their brains around it, you know. And this is the reason I think within the West they almost expect something to be expensive for it to have any benefit. It doesn't seem to make sense yet anyway, that you can have something that's inexpensive that you will buy when you're just buying your regular groceries, that can be good for you. We've kind of lost that understanding that food is our medicine, and I think because we've lost the understanding that food is our medicine, we've also lost the connection that food is what is making us ill, amongst other things, but in particular having that real negative impact upon our health. But slowly I think it's starting to there's some connection being made. I did want to ask you also, because we are heading to now the close of 2020, and also, you know, there are different ages that have been talked about for a long time, and the new age that we're moving into, the new age of Aquarius, and how this is going to create such an upliftment of humanity for those who are aware of it and want to take that journey and want to burst into that greater, and I would say sovereign version of themselves. So we are all individual sovereigns, but also collectively sovereign. How do you talk to this period of time for us?
First, thank you for that great observation. I really appreciated it, that how we're so saturated with materialism that we can't respect something in its natural order. Mm. And, you know, we don't have to pay a big price for sunshine or wind. Everything significant is free on this universe, except what humanity repackages.
Yeah.
But so be the world, so be the way. But we definitely can recommend people to source some good basic organic turmeric and enjoy that. And yes, absolutely, yes. The individual sovereignty is not just what I'm aiming to create. I'm aiming to create a movement of collective sovereignty. I do believe that my book and my writings and my teachings are helping global consciousness and evolution of global consciousness, and sovereign, self-governing, self-empowered, self-respecting, self-celebrating, with healthy ethical dharma boundaries, people, units make up a more dharmic society, a more self-aware, self-conscious, self-restrained, and evolved society. And that is what we have to go for, Carol, because it's been really painful to see the cracks and how less we've evolved, and the pandemic really made us naked and showed us all our pitfalls and punctured all our beliefs that we're invincible with all our technology and our science and whatnot. And it's really now time to go back to the old, simple truth, with or without a price tag. But it is time for us to discern where does the greater truth lie in nature, in protection of ecology and environment, in remembering that our mind can be our enemy, but really it's up to us, the soul, the self, to choose it and make it our best friend, to connect with wisdom traditions, not just mine, but any wisdom tradition that strengthens you. I always give a go ahead for that. And if people want to check out mine, that's fine too. But it's time to educate ourselves spiritually. We go to school, we get our certificates, we get our professional degrees, but what we don't get is any kind of wisdom school that qualifies souls to be human beings with a human heart and a human strategic, intelligent mind, and to lead our lives in a way that we have minimum impact on the planet and we can be source of dharma and upliftment for others. What can we do that we remember our own value and become valuable for others? And I'm hoping that my teachings on sovereign self will fill that gap and support the other teachers who are doing this kind of work in a similar fashion.
Perfect. I want to ask you something again. I've just been scrolling through your Instagram, and one of the quotes popped out at me simply because of the word sleepwalking that you used. Your divine self is always shining behind your sleepwalking mind. And the reason that kind of drew me in is because of the year that we've had, and so many hidden truths have started to really be exposed, and so much of the reality or the hidden aspects of the world that we've been living in have actually started to come forward, and people are starting to speak the truth. And for the ones that have awakened into the reality of the world that we're in, and actually starting on a deeper journey of self and sovereign self, and yet then what we're also trying to do is then for the ones around us, friends, family, work colleagues, who have not yet caught on to that aspect of things, that are not yet seeing the bigger picture as we do, are still sleepwalking, and we're very much aware of that. And we talk about people who are awake and people who are asleep, and it can get frustrating because we're all trying to jolt everybody up to get into this greater awareness of what is happening, so that we can actually move through it powerfully. And it's hard to remember that, like you say here, that the self is always behind the sleepwalking mind. So even the most deeply asleep person that we think that we're trying to awaken has that in them. How, I know it's nothing that we can do, because it is a release within themselves and an awareness, and we don't know what that trigger point will be. But what can we do, even though we know we can't do anything? But even if you do have an answer, you can see I'm asking you a question that doesn't really have an answer. But how can we be in compassion about that, and less frustration, and less, that area where we're trying to tell people something is happening? Particularly, for instance, if I break it down, we have this health issue, and yet it doesn't seem as serious as we've been led to believe. And then now across the world, they are offering us a solution that is a created solution. I'm picking my words very carefully here. That is outside of the body. It's not nature. It's not anything from spirit. So we're trying to awaken them to the fact that if they go down this route, which is linked to technology, and not technology for the betterment of mankind, how can we, we are trying to awaken that person. But is it that we have to just step back and allow them to maybe take that path on this incarnation? And how do we find to reconcile with ourselves that may happen? Because, for some of us, it could be somebody very dear and close to us that then makes that choice, that then takes them into a space that doesn't give them a comfortable outcome.
And for exactly these kind of questions, I really appreciate going back to the Hindu holy book, the Bhagavad Gita, because it doesn't kind of paint the picture with like compassion for all, peace for all. In fact, it teaches us some self-protection, especially if we are surrounded by sleepwalkers. And that's a very big difference in the Vedic tradition versus, for example, the Buddhist tradition, which I deeply respect. But the Buddhist tradition grew and was strengthened by a monastic path, monks who had left the world, and so they didn't have to deal with some of the things that we householders or regular people have to deal with. Whereas the Bhagavad Gita was taught by a much married Krishna to a much married Arjuna on a battlefield where Arjuna had to deal with, the student had to deal with attacks from their own sleepwalking cousins who he had grown up loving and playing with. And now they were his arch enemies trying to snatch his honor, his wealth, his kingdom from him, and being really mean in the process, not just taking it away because Arjuna was willing to give it away for peace, but they wanted to be dishonoring. And Krishna, the teacher, said, you can't just take on some fake compassion and bury your head in the sand. And I believe in that because it teaches me discernment. And it says that first and foremost, when the yuga or the epoch or the cosmic time is full of more unconsciousness than consciousness, more sleepwalkers than waking people, more, false gurus than real teachers, more political usurpers than leaders, then at that time, first and foremost, protect yourself.
Right.
And take right actions for yourself. And so I would say to all people who wish to awaken and wish to stay awake, awaken and stay awake, be careful of the company you keep and don't invest oodles of time, energy, money in trying to wake up everyone. Because the Vedas talk about these huge cycles or epochs of time that last over millions of years. And right now we're in the dark time called the Kali Yuga. Yes. And what I do as a teacher is I invest my time and my awareness and my speech and my consciousness in people who still want to stay awake and keep their head above the matrix and not drown in it. Mm-hmm. And that's how I'm able to make a change. I'm also realistic that I may not be able to change the trend and the choices of the collective. And there is a concept in Ayurveda of collective dissonance and collective mass extinguishing of humanity. And it's a big Sanskrit word. I'm just going to roll it out. And it's called Janapada Dvansa. And it says humans will become arrogant. They will be proud of their fake science and fake technology, and they're going to lose ethics. They will compromise on nature and human values, and seasons will change, and earthquakes will increase, and volcanoes will burst, and it will rain at the wrong time, and the kings will, and people will accumulate weapons of mass destruction, and they will use the science for their own benefit. These are teachings in a 2,000-year-old book. And then it says that, and then humans will, destroy themselves. And who will be the cause of it? Their own ignorance, their own ego, their own selfishness, their own loss of dharma. And what are the right people meant to do in the process? Observe, pray for them, but protect themselves. And beyond a point, the collective rules. These are hard times. That's why I'm doing my part by writing the book and trying to lead a sovereign life and making sovereign decisions about my own body and about my own health and doing what I can. And I hope what I say helps our listeners. Thank you for asking a hard question because it needs to be asked.
And thank you for your answer as well. It was like you said, these things have been written, as much as we think we have to go through cycles of existence and awareness. And it is so true that we really have to start being very protective of ourselves, because it can be tricky when you are doing your best to awaken somebody, but the only way that you can ever have a conversation sometimes is then to diminish your own light, because you're not being seen. So you have to bring away so many layers of yourself, and like you said, if you're not too careful, then that trying to stay awake then becomes tricky to do. So you have to surround yourself with the people that are going to assist and keep you in the space that you want to and need to be. And it may be that when people actually witness where you're at and why you're not getting drawn into the darkness and the fear and all of the other things, that will actually bring them out, because they'll see people having a completely different experience in a similar environment, it would seem. Have you got any closing thoughts on that?
There is a concept in the Vedas of an individual mind and a collective mind. And right now, our individual mind is very challenged by the collective mind, which is full of darkness, pretense, ego, confusion, arrogance, human arrogance, fake science, and fake news.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying fake science, fake, but quick science. It has not resolved. It has not brought us to the truth. We're still in trial mode. We have all this clutter and cluster and confusion. So if you get a dark thought here and there, I'm telling my listeners, don't think you've regressed. You've just been bitten. Breathe deep breaths, look at the sky, look at nature, and constantly give yourself reminders that there is something more beyond this hubba of confusion and clutter and existential, self-destruction and self-sabotage. I am visiting India right now, and I have like a whole community of people I've known for the last 50 years, but I barely pick up the phone and even talk to people because I'm so selective about even my conversations. And I'm not saying a bulk of the people I know are sleepwalkers. I'm just saying who is awake. And if I can't find anyone that day, I'd rather read the Bhagavad Gita or meditate or take a solitary walk. That keeps me good.
So good. And if I can just finish with you with the Her Conversations questions, and you may have touched on these already, but just again, is what tools would you say have assisted in your awakening over the course of your lifetime?
The ability to breathe deeply, one. The ability to separate from the mind and know this stuff is happening in my mind. That's not my true nature. That was a big one. And the third tool that helped me was, even though there is one self in all beings, on the planet there are dark and light beings, and I got to protect myself and work with the people who want the light and support the light. These things have helped me, Carol. I'm not a pushover for all beings are angels. I don't go into all that stuff. I don't buy that. They are deep down. They're deep down, but their minds may be so dysfunctional that all you can do is pray for them and protect them and hope they'll catch my writing somewhere when they're ready. Everybody will wake up one day. Nobody is bad. Nobody's evil. Everybody's just ignorant and sleepwalking.
Yeah. And what tools can you share for the awakening?
Oh, I put 3 years of my tools in my book, Sovereign Self. But I would say that every day, ask yourself, who am I? And the answer may come, I'm the body, I'm a woman, I'm Asian or Caribbean or American. But keep asking, who am I? Who am I? Where was I before I was in the body? Where do I live inside the body? Where will I go up? Contemplations will sooner or later help you manifest the right teacher and the right book.
And what are your favorite self-care rituals and practices? How do you take care of you?
I just love waking up early in the morning. And even before the sun comes out, I walk out and I look in the direction of the east. And I know that there is a quiet presence and darkness is not a reality. And it's just a matter of time before the sky gets lit up. And I like seeing that light. And as the sky outside me becomes gradually more and more lit up, the sky inside me is reminded of my inner sun, the self. That's been my favorite self-care practice is having a routine with the sunrise. Another self-care practice is lots of good sleep. I don't push myself. I rest, I walk. I also gift myself some solitude. So I don't allow anybody to guilt me for being an introvert now.
Mm. Mm.
I like that. I like being, I'll meet people when I want to, but I like lighting candles, listening to music, writing, reading, just being quiet with my dog. And that feels good.
Mm.
Lots of
I can,
self-love,
I can.
lots of permissions to be and how I want to be. You want to add something?
No, all I was saying is I can relate to you on that on both levels, getting up early, with or before the sun, and the need for solitude.
Mm.
I do like people. I have a podcast, I speak, but I just find that I am so much better for having long periods of solitude, and because it seems, it may seem that I'm in silence, but my mind is having big conversations with also working out so much stuff. So me being in my own space is actually me being very more busy than if I'm with people. I find sometimes if I'm with people who are not of like mind, that for me is a difficulty, because then I'm having to find very trivial things to have conversations about. And although I do like, fun things, I wouldn't call myself a trivial person. So then to have a trivial conversation is very difficult for me. So then anyone who tries to, engage me in just a simple, trivial conversation will probably not get the best aspect of me, because I'm struggling there. I don't know what to say, and I usually then will go quiet. And for people who need trivialities and the silence to be filled, they see your silence as a rebuttal. They take it very personally and get very offended by it, where the opposite is true. Is if I don't have anything to say to you, I'm not going to pollute your space with nonsense. That's my thought process, but it doesn't always come across that
No,
way.
that's very beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, that's very beautiful. And usually the spiritual path begins with reining in your speech first.
Mm.
And like you said, having momentous conversations, because now quietens down. You can't listen to that inner voice.
Mm.
I confirm that, and I totally applaud your choice. And um, where is the time for trivial, dangling, gossipy conversations? There's no time for that.
Mm.
When I started going inside me 2 decades ago, more than that, a lot of criticism from family friends and whatnot.
Mm.
She's arrogant, she's rude, she doesn't come when we invite her. But gradually, those same people admire my work and reach out to me for help. So it's more a test of our own endurance than theirs.
That's great. I shall bear that in mind, actually. Oh, thank you. And I was going to ask you, Shunya, if you can share what's coming up for you next. Talk more about when your book becomes available in hard copy for those who want it, and then if you have any upcoming programs or anything else that you'd like to talk about at this point.
I'm so excited that the Kindle version is already available on the Amazon of every country. And then the hard copy is coming out on the 29th, so it's just around the corner. And it's a beautiful hound keeper's edition book. And my publishers have gone all out because they really believe that this is the first time the ancient wisdom has been put in such easy to interpret step-by-step path without diluting it. And I have the Alchemy through Ayurveda course, which is available online. And I also meet my students, every few weeks by a retreat. And it's like, it has students worldwide. And I invite people if they want to check out Ayurveda. And then I have a retreat coming up, Aligned with the Self, on January 16th. And if people wanted, if our listeners wanted, they could just join me for a couple of hours. It'll be California time, but if you join, then you will also get a recording of it. And everything is available on my website. It's my name, acharyashunya.com, or you can go to awakenedself.com, which is the name of my foundation, Awakened Self Foundation. And so lots of things coming up. I have one more book in the pipeline. It's on goddess power within. I have just stuff that's percolating as I keep pursuing my truth. I was a bookworm and I used to hide from the world, and now I'm on the world stage by recognizing my sovereignty.
That's perfect. It's a perfect circle, isn't it? Coming back to the thing that absorbed you is now that this is what you're gifting to all of us. And I know you mentioned your website. Can you just mention that again, and then also any other ways that we can find you, any social media platforms that we can find you on?
Pretty much everywhere. My team has me on every social media, and I'm sure Carol will post my name with the right spelling. And if you just look up Acharya Shunya on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you shall find me. And then my website too is with my name, acharyashunya.com. You can also, if you don't remember my Indian name right away, it's not easy to remember, then you can always look up awakenedself.com, awakenedself.com, and you shall find me, my wisdom school, my classes, and lots of free gifts, lots of things that people can take away, because I still give out free things because they're meaningful to me.
Beautiful. Well, that's the conversation that we're having today. I want to say thank you so much for joining me, and it's great to connect, even though virtually, back or if we're talking time-wise forward with India, it's been a few years since I've been there. So just knowing that you're there at this point in time is just bringing back some really beautiful memories for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Shunya, for your conversation with me in this episode, and thank you for listening. You can find out more about me on my website, which is carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaewhittick.com. You can find me on Facebook under the same name, and then also connect with me on Instagram, Twitter, or Parler as Kazmic. That's CAZMICK. So until the next episode, enjoy your week. Thank you.